Welcome, everybody, to the Between Two Wheels podcast. This is your host for today, Tyler Janke. We are going to be doing a race preview of the Criterium du Dauphine 2018 edition, a race in southeast France. Prior to 2010, this race was known as the Criterium du Dauphine Libre, as it went around the Dauphine region in southeast France, as I mentioned. This region-locked race now extends a little bit outside of the southeast region, and it's an 8-day stage. Typically, you're going to see the Tour de France as a Tour de France prep race. It's also organized by the same organizer, ASO, as well. And you'll usually see the Tour de France front runners at the fore in this race. And of course, this race was started, like most of these are, by a newspaper as a way to promote circulation. The La Dauphine Libre was the newspaper. First edition of the race was in 1947. Previously, this has been a race where you can see, all the Tour de France contenders and whether they're on form or ramping up their training correctly. And it's also had some riders come on the radar that were perhaps peaking too soon or simply at their height when the real contenders weren't quite at theirs. You've seen that in the past with Andrew Chalansky when he beat Froome in 2014. Jakob Fuglsang won last year, the 2017 edition. Yanni Brajkovic won back in 2010. Other than that, you're looking at a lot of Tour de France contenders, Tour de France podiums, and then some of those that were relegated as well for other reasons. Some interesting Tour de France and Dauphine stats. So the Criterium du Dauphine is the only race that was also won by the quintuple winners of the Tour de France, namely Jacques Anquetil, Eddie Merckx, Bernard Hinault, and Miguel Indurain. But can you also include Lance Armstrong? I don't know. I know he's had his title removed, but he also won this race as well. 9 other racers have also won the race in the Tour de France in the same year. Louis Mbobé in 1955, Jacques Anquetil in 1963, Eddie Merckx in 1971, Luis Ocaña in 73, Bernard Thévenet in 75, and Bernard Hinault in 1979-81. Miguel Indurain in 1995, and Bradley Wiggins 2012, along with Chris Froome in 2013, 15, and 2016. As we mentioned, disgraced cyclist Lance Armstrong did win this race in 2002 and 2003, but as we know, he's been retroactively stripped of those titles as well as his Tour de France wins. All right, let's talk real quick about the route itself for this year. 8 stages. It's got a prologue plus 7 stages. 953 kilometers total in length. So it starts off with a flat individual time trial prologue of 6.6 kilometers. It has one flat triple T this year, stage 3 at 35 kilometers, 2 lumpy days without a mountaintop finish. But the last 4 are mountaintop finishes coming in succession from stages 4 through 7. This race makes a week-long kind of snaky clockwise route tour around the France, starting in the central eastern portion of France. They're just outside the south region where you would see in Valence. That's where they start. It's about 150 kilometers north of Mont Ventoux, so you kind of get an idea there. It's usually where this is a transition day between the Tour de France, going from the Pyrenees to the Alps. After the prologue in Valence, the race heads slightly northwest, going kind of in an eastern direction in France before finally reaching its most northern point at Louhans Châteaurenaud for the Triple T on Wednesday in stage 3. The race then comes back to the meat of the edition and the event of the last 4-day slog through the Alps as it starts to come back to the south at stage 4, where it ends in Lens and Vercors before moving east in a north finishing direction for the final day Sunday in Saint-Gervais. Is that Ricky's hometown? Anyway, highlights. We've got, like I said, a triple T for stage 3, giving obviously some certain teams a distinct advantage over the climbing heavy teams. No individual time trial, but for the 6.6 kilometer prologue, which is a totally flat course. The last 4 days are all mountaintop finishes. Stages 4 through 6 all include HC climbs in them, either at the finish or along the way. And then Sunday's last day is just all Category 1 climbs, 4 of them in succession. None of the climbs that I looked through there, because it's just a little bit more north along the Swiss and French Alps section, where then you see a lot of the Tour de France go. So while it's got some of these big climbs, none of them were the notable climbs that you would see in the Tour, although I'm sure they passed through them at some point, just not the big finishing climbs that you'd normally see. All right, let's talk about the riders to watch. you also have the Tour de Suisse starting the week after the Dauphiné. So you're going to see a lot of teams split their Tour de France preparation between these two programs, which you normally do. But the Dauphiné seems to get a lot of, over the years, it's kind of been the race that the riders have been going to, but not necessarily so. As a matter of fact, this year, Jacob Fuglsang isn't even signed up to defend it. All right, so let's start off here. And, the Tour de Suisse is going, so we'll probably do a preview of that as well. So look for that coming out next week. Some of the top riders, and I'm just going off of taking their teams as they're listed here and going then down through. We'll pick some of the riders specific. We'll pick some of the teams specific and kind of give a breakdown. But I want to say these first two riders that I'm going to mention here are probably the two that I'm most not worried about, but the ones I give the highest accolades to here. Adam Yates, Mitchelton Scott. So he's coming off a pretty decent Tour of California. He's recovering from his early season crash, and I kind of expect Adam to be an antagonist in this race. I mean, with his brother's huge results, and then his big demise, he's probably motivated in many different ways to have a good race. The team, though, it's not stacked like they were at the Giro, but should get some help from the likes of Gerald Impey, who did have a good spring. Romain Bardet, AG2R. He's coming off his best ever Tour de France 2017 with a third place. He was second until the final time trial, which he got taken over by Iran. Bardet should be coming into form in this race. We've seen him going pretty good early on with Strade Bianca second place to Tish Benoot. Then he got a third at Liège-Bastogne-Liège when he was in the breakaway near the end there with Mike Woods. His team looks fine. It should be noted, though, that the team isn't as vital, what I think isn't as vital in these 1 week stage races. Especially with these 4 days of heavy climbing. I mean, and I say might not be. Your team could obviously play a big role, but you're not looking at a Grand Tour setting pace for day after day. So probably not as big a deal in this one. BMC Racing, they don't really have anybody looking for this. They do have TJ. They have, not in this race. Tour de Suisse has TJ and Richie Port, so you're not looking at a team that's coming to this race kind of with Patrick Bevan, maybe Crusoe or Dylan Toons. They might be able to hang in there a little bit and mix it up, at least on the first few days. But I'm not looking for a real tour contender for these BMC in this race. For Hansgrohe, same kind of thing. They have Emmanuel Bachmann. They have Peter Koenig. Other than that, I mean, Koenig really hasn't done much at all this year, so I'm not really sure what that team's got going on for this race, maybe than just pack filler. EF Education First Drag Pack presented by Cannondale. They have several good climbers. They have some of them that are coming off of the Giro, so they might be looking with good form, but maybe a little tired. They do have Pierre Roland and Lawson Craddock, and maybe one of those can pull out like a Talansky type effort. Pierre Roland likes to get in the breaks and go for those long distance kind of on the climbing stages. And Craddock has been coming back into form a little bit as well. So we'll see what that team has, but they don't have really any overall grand leader. Warren Barguil, Team Fortuneo Samsic. Warren had, an amazing 2017 Tour de France, and then right after that, he just brought himself into, he thought he was like the next great thing, and he showed this with his eventual sacking at the Vuelta while not waiting for his team later and just riding for himself. So now he's with a new team. 2018, though, he's only poked his head into the top 10 once with an 8th place on stage 7 of the Volta Catalunya in March. So we haven't really seen much of it at all, and it could be due to the, kind of dropping down to the Continental team rather than being on the World Tour team. So it'll be interesting to see how he comes in to this race where he really needs to step through, and I believe his team is riding the Tour this year as well. So Movie Star, you'd expect them to have some sort of murderer's row here for the race, but their start list is devoid of any of the big three, the Nairo, Valverde, and Landa. So I believe they might all be doing Tour Suisse or something else, but as of right now, they are not lined up for this race. We have Julian Alaphilippe, a quick step. I mean, look, he skipped his defense of the Tour of California this year, but he's coming in with some good spring results. I mean, he had back-to-back victories on stages, I think 1 and 2 of the Basque Country. So he can threaten the 1 week races, but this might be a step too far for him still. We'll see how he goes there. Sky, looks like they've scrapped Egan Bernal from the start list. Currently they have Geraint Thomas, Kwiatkowski as their possible team race leaders. Speaking of race, they do have Gianni Moscon, though, on the start list for Sky. So you never know how he might pull out a result for this one as well. Vincenzo Nibali, Bahrain Merida. He's looking for another Grand Tour result, and Nibali is coming into this time of year with somewhat of a question mark. I mean, he did win the first monument of the year, the Milan-San Remo, but since then he's failed to even crack the top 10 at all for any single stage or overall GC. I think he had a top 10 on a mountain jersey in a race. Better than that, Milan-San Remo, and that's it. Ilnur Zakarin of Katusha, he's coming off his impressive third on GC for the Vuelta last year. His 2018 season, though, hasn't reflected the kind that he had at the end. Katusha also brings in Ian Boswell, so they have a double I threat for their team, Ian and Ilnur. No? A lot of jumbo, a lot of NL jumbo. The team doesn't appear to have, any evident overall leader. They are bringing their two Americans, though. They have Nilson Palace and Sepp Kuss. But and the team also brings Floris de Tier, which he does a pretty good job of climbing. And I heard it was rumored that Antoine Tolhoek, who got 13th, their highest Tour California rider, was 13th in Tour California, that he was also coming to this race. So we'll see. That's kind of your mid-level. It would be interesting. Maybe those guys will just be gunning for stage wins. I'd like to see Nelson and obviously Sepp Kuss kind of come into their own. So we'll keep an eye on them as well. Dan Martin of the UAE team Emirates. Martin is hoping to turn around the team's GC hopefuls for 2018, do a total 180 from where their current trajectory is. I mean, he's had an unusual 2018. He only cracked the top 10 twice, 2 races, the 4th in the Volta and 9th in the individual time trial at the Tour Romandie, which he also got 10th in GC for that race. So, while he's starting to come in a little better, as we saw in Romandie, he's still not the Dan Martin that we've seen in the past. So he's looking to get himself some self-confidence in this race and maybe show his team he is worthy of their support for the Tour de France, because Aru looked really, really bad, and their whole team just kind of hasn't really come into what you would be expecting. Odd Christian Eiking of Norway, Wanty Group Gobert. Actually, I have no idea how this guy goes, but he gets listed for the best name, Odd Christian. I have no idea what his religious affiliation is, but his parents were obviously against him having much notice. All right, so the race starts Sunday, the 3rd of June, going through next Sunday, the 10th of June, and right before we start to get, the first prep here for the Tour de France. So stage, the P, the prologue, as I mentioned, is very short on Sunday. Then you start stage 1 on Monday. It is 179 kilometers going from Valence to Saint-Just-Saint-Rambert. Not sure if I pronounced that correctly, but it's got a bunch of little categorized climbs from 2s to 3s, and then spits out at the end with 4 4s. So it's probably going to be a breakaway, and you're going to see some guys try to get up the road and get into Jersey before. I don't know about a sprint, though, and it didn't look like I actually didn't take a look at the sprinters, because they're not going to be playing much of an overall, and they only have real 2 chances here. Stage 2 then is another similar type of stage. It's got category 3s and 4s mixed in over the last 100 kilometers, total kilometers of 180. But it is downhill and cruising into the finish for the last 30. It goes from Montbrison to Belleville and Boisgelais. No clue if I got that right. So that should be another interesting, similar stage to the one before, although the climbs come a little closer to the end than in stage 1. Stage 3, then you have the Triple T team time trial. Like I said, it was just 35 kilometers, pan flat. So it should be interesting to see which teams are coming out full force of that. It's just kind of a big oval that they go out. I can't tell looking at the profile. It looks like there's some turns that are some 180s, some 90s. So it could be some problems with the team time trial if it's not taken properly, if they haven't done their work. And then you got stage 4 through 7, like I said, all having the climbing. You have 181 kilometers, 131, 110, 129. So it's a really interesting little way they do that, going from 181 kilometers, like I said, on stage 4, and then it just kind of gradually decreases 110 kilometers. So Saturday is going to be really interesting, because that's got some HC category climbs. It starts with an HC, another HC, and then a category 2, and then finishes on a category 1 to La Rousseau, but it's only 110 kilometers. So you're looking at just right around 60 some miles, and that could be on from the gun, and should be pretty interesting. All right, so I hope you enjoyed that. We will then be doing also a breakdown of the Tour de Suisse and from some of those others coming up. Also, one that we have to look at, though, is the Hammer Series. I don't know if anybody's been interested in that. We'll have to do a breakdown of that as well. I'm actually picking on this one Romain Bardet. I think he's got he's had some early season form, and I think you should be able to see him going well to break out a win. There's always a few riders that maybe we didn't get on the start list that'll be interesting to see. Please like our show, share it around when you can, and with that, we'll see you next week.